Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in. Buddy, welcome to another episode of Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm summertiming it up here. It's not actually summer, but it feels really nice and warm and cozy here in my recording quote unquote studio, which is just a desk in my bedroom. So I'm in my little tank top, feeling the summertime vibes. I'm kind of like willing it into myself. So today, what I want to talk about is consistency. How many times have you heard kids need consistency, consistency, consistency? You know, when I hear consistency the most is from my clients who are going through a separation. And they're very, very concerned that there's not, or perhaps won't be, consistency between the two different houses. We're going to talk about that today. But first, I have to give you my own confession, right? Stinking podcast called Confessions of a Parent Coach. I better be bringing a confession, right? So my confession for you today is that despite all of the amazing preaching that I do about letting our partners not be on the same page as us, that it doesn't matter, that we're talking only solely about our relationship with our children and our partners are creating their relationship with their children, and we do not need to meddle in that. The truth is that I judge my husband all the time for his parenting, all the time. Have you heard that expression, we teach what we need to learn? Well, here I am, teaching what I need to learn, because I really do need to learn, and I have learned and continue to learn and reteach myself because I keep forgetting that we don't need to be on the same page. My husband is actually a phenomenal parent, and my judgment of him is not helpful. But the reason why is because of consistency, right? Or that's what I like to tell myself. It's not because I think he's bad or wrong. It's not because my ego's getting involved, which is a total lie, by the way. It's always my ego. It's because of consistency. I think that it's important for our kids to be getting consistent messages from both of their parents. I want my kids to be getting the same feedback from Mike that they get from me. And when Mike doesn't toe the line, he's ruining everything, right? Here's what I want to have as your sort of takeaway from today's podcast about consistency. The consistency that we talk about as parenting experts, it's not the consistency that you think. We take the idea of consistency as parents and make it mean that things need to be consistent from place to place, from relationship to relationship. If this is how it's taught at school, this is how it's taught at home. If this is how grandma does it, then this is how we do it at home, or vice versa, really, right? If this is how I do it at my house, that's how grandma needs to do it at her house. If I'm divorced, if this is how I do it at my house, I really want my ex to do it the same way at his house. That's what we take consistency to mean. But the truth is, that really is an insult to our children's intelligence, even. Not to mention the fact that it's not possible. And here's what I mean when I say it's an insult to their intelligence. Kids are relationship machines because humans are relationship machines. Connection is the fundamental, most important security factor for all humans. This is why the most important and immediate thing that happens when babies are born is attachment. It's why if we don't have healthy attachment, it causes all these problems down the road. Relationships are the currency of humanity. And so your child came earthside wired to form multiple different relationships, infinite even different relationships, and to learn how to be successful in each of those relationships. Your child does not need only one way of interacting with somebody to be successful. And we see this all the time, right? Like, how many times have you gone to like a parent-teacher conference and the person that your teacher is describing is someone that you have never met, even though it's your own child? Because at school, your kid behaves totally differently than they do at home. Why does that happen? Because kids know how to assess a situation, assess a human that they're interacting with, assess the environment that they're in, and make decisions about how to show up successfully in that particular situation. This is why kids behave differently for dad than they do for mom sometimes. This is why kids, show up differently with grandma than they do with their parents. We see this all the time. Your child is capable of having a lack of consistency from place to place to place, from person to person to person. So the consistency that we're talking about as parenting experts is not consistency all across the board. What we're talking about is consistency in their relationship with you, consistency within a relationship, not between relationships. Think about how much freedom that gives you. How would it be for you to release that feeling of needing to manage and make sure that every experience your child has throughout the day is consistent? Oh my God, how could you even do that? Like, who could keep up with that? What a weight to take off your shoulders. And now let's put your energy into making sure and asking yourself, am I being consistent? Because that's something you actually can do something about, and that's something that actually matters. Here we are spending all this time and energy trying to control something that's, first of all, impossible, and second of all, irrelevant. Kids don't need things to be consistent across the board. And it's not possible for us to make it that way. But they do need consistency in their relationship with us. And that is something that we can give them. Because once they have that consistency, we become a known quantity to them, which creates emotional safety. We become the predictable piece of their life. Yeah, the world is a swirly, whirly place. All of a sudden, my teacher was absent today, or we're talking about teenagers, like all of a sudden one of my friends is going through something crazy or isn't talking to me, or I've got friend drum or whatever. But when I come back home, when I deal with my mom or my dad or my parent, I know where I stand. That's my foundation. How do we create consistency? That becomes the second question, right? Okay, now I've decided to put my focus on simply being consistent within myself in this relationship with this other person. That's plenty. I don't need to worry about everything else. Okay, how do I do that? Which is a fair question. How do we be consistent with our kids? The simplest way, I would say the lowest hanging fruit in terms of achieving consistency, is following through on our boundaries with consequences. Don't say that if you watch TV before finishing your homework, you're going to miss out on TV for the weekend and then not take the TV away. You can't do that. That's not consistent. Or how about if sometimes when my kid throws a ball in the house, I ignore it, but then other times I remind them and sort of absentmindedly tell them not to do that. But then other times I scream at them and yell at them. And then other times I take the ball away. That's not consistent. What is a child supposed to make that mean? It's really confusing. Whereas if every single time this rule gets crossed, this boundary gets broken, I respond exactly the same way, no matter what day of the week it is, what time of day it is. We just say, uh-oh, we don't throw balls in the house. Guess we'll need to take a break from that ball. Oh my gosh, how predictable. What do you suppose happens when we're consistent? Well, first of all, we're doing all the stuff I just talked about. We're creating emotional safety. We're the rock solid foundation with our kids. Yay. And pretty soon this kid's not going to throw a ball in the house because they don't have to wonder what's going to happen. The answer is very clear. Kids are smart. As long as we give them the information they need to connect the dots, they will learn. And so consistency isn't just about our relationship, although it is. It's also one of the easiest ways to improve our kids' behavior. So I would say the lowest hanging fruit is following through with predictable, calm consequences when our kids cross boundaries. That's the easiest way to create consistency. Then we could start talking about like a routine and having predictable times and things that we do every day and things like that, and build on that. And that's what I do with my clients. It's a layered thing. We're not going to just do it all at once and expect you at the flip of a switch to all of a sudden turn into like Mary Poppins. That's not fair. So I do not do that with my clients. So I hope that's been helpful for you. I want you to think about the difference between consistency between relationships and consistency within a relationship. Put your focus on consistency within your relationship with your child. So much more attainable and so much more powerful. That's your power play right there. Okay. How do we always finish these episodes? with a question from a listener. And you have learned by now probably that I try my absolute best to make sure that our listener questions are aligned with our episode topic. And today is no exception. The question I got from my listener today was, what do I do when my husband and I are not on the same page about parenting? And this person gave the example of screen time, which I love because that's the example I always give my clients when it comes to being on different pages about screen time. So I like to teach all of my clients, and it's so important and it's such a universal question. So I first want to normalize this for you, listener. This dilemma is very common. I would say it's actually one of the things that stops people from working with me sometimes. It's like, okay, sure, I want to do this work, but my partner's not going to do it. So that's not going to make any difference. Not true at all. The number one message I always like to give my clients when it comes to this topic is nothing, including your partner, including your co-parent, including your ex, can stop you from being the parent you want to be in relation to your child. So stop using that excuse, stop hiding behind that fear, and take the leap. So what do I do when I'm not on the same page as my parent and she's asking specifically about screen time? I'm going to give you a great example of that. So Mike and I do not agree about screen time. If we're up to me, we would have no screens in this house. We would not have an iPad. Our kids would probably have flip phones. We would not have a TV. We wouldn't have subscriptions to any of the streaming apps. I just don't really see any benefit of screen time in our family. When our kids were young, so this is before smartphones, before iPads, before any of that stuff, we were just talking about TV at that time. He literally said, like, well, you have to watch Saturday morning cartoons. Like it was our kids' God-given right to have access to the Looney Tunes every Saturday. And I didn't agree, but this is not an autocracy. We're a team. And so he decided that he really wanted to get cable at the time. I sound like a 9 million-year-old person probably to a lot of the younger parents listening. So he really wanted our kids to have morning screen time on Saturdays. And then, of course, it all snowballed from there. Now we have to have screen time rules. We have to have a policy and a container and blah, blah, blah. Well, we do. We have rules around screen time. And guess who follows them? Me. Mike, because screen time is not a huge value of his, meaning it's not a huge value of his to limit screen time, he is a total pushover dad when it comes to screens. And our kids know this. And so guess how many times kids badger me about screens? Pretty much never, because they know that if they come to me and say, hey, can we have screen time? I will refer to our screen time policy and say, well, no, it's a weekday. We don't have screen time on Wednesday. Or you're welcome to have screen time as soon as all the things on your checklist are done. Or screen time's at 4:00 and it's 2:30. So whatever. And they know that I follow the rule. So maybe every once in a while, kids will ask me. Even then, they only ask me once. There's no badgering, there's no whining, there's no cajoling, there's no arguing. Mike is plagued by screen time gremlins all day long, especially in the summertime or on school breaks and stuff like that. So this is a great example of Mike's created his dynamic with his kids, which is none of my business, and that's between them. And I still have managed to create the exact amount of peace and serenity around screens that I wanted. It's not a problem for you to not be on the same page as your co-parent. And yes, I acknowledge that this is a really kind of low stakes scenario. We're talking about screens, not really big things. And when there's divorce and separation in the mix, can be some really high stakes, really emotionally upsetting things that you're not on the same page as. Even then, this principle must prevail because there's nothing we can do to change the fact that our partner is not on the same page as us or our ex or our co-parent. And if that's true, this philosophy is the only path forward, because fixating on a thing that you can't control only stops you from focusing on the things you can, which is how you show up in your relationship with your kid. Those harder circumstances don't make this philosophy not true. They just make this philosophy harder to stick to. And I'll give you full acknowledgement on that because it is 100% true. And that's one reason why a lot of people choose to work with someone like me, because it is hard to stick to this stuff. We need constant reminders and accountability around I'm going to let this go. I'm going to focus on what I can do and what I can control because I can't get us on the same page. That is hard. It is hard. And just because it's hard doesn't mean you don't have to do it, which might as well be a t-shirt that every parent wears. Am I right? So I hope that's helpful for you. I hope that you are thinking differently about consistency. Remember, even in that whole, like, we're not on the same page thing, just focus on the consistency within your relationship with this kiddo. Let everybody else figure out their own dynamic. And I will talk to you again next week. If you want to get your question answered on the podcast, send it in. Go to my website, AnnKaplanParentCoach.com, and just click on that contact form and send me your question. I can't wait to answer it on a future podcast. Have a great week, everybody, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.